I'm from New Hampshire, a state known for its postcard-perfect scenery and sleepy little towns. Life there was often as quiet as the snow-covered winters, a rhythm of routine that many found comforting but one that often left me restless. I grew up in a close-knit community where change seemed to arrive like the seasons, slowly and predictably. By my early 20s, I felt trapped in this cycle, as though I was just existing, rather than truly living. Back then, I had just moved into a modest apartment about 30 minutes outside of Manchester, a place with thin walls and a radiator that groaned louder than the television. I'd also recently come out of a 2-year relationship. While our breakup wasn't hostile, it left me emotionally unmoored. I wasn't heartbroken, but I was adrift, unsure of my direction and whether the life I had was the one I wanted. My job as a junior clerk at a local law firm didn't help. The work was mundane, the kind of 9-to-5 grind that had me counting the minutes until lunch. The person who kept me grounded during that time was my grandmother. She was a strong woman, small in stature but formidable in spirit, the type who never let life's hardships shake her faith. After my grandfather passed away, an event that hit the whole family hard, she leaned even more heavily into her religion, finding solace in her church and her community. "Come with me to church this Sunday," she suggested one evening, her voice gentle but insistent. She had noticed the heaviness in my demeanor, the quiet resignation I carried. At first, I hesitated. Church hadn't been a significant part of my life since childhood, and I wasn't particularly religious. But her persistence was impossible to ignore. I could see the hope in her eyes, the belief that this small act could somehow bring me the peace I seemed to be searching for. Reluctantly, I agreed. The church was exactly what you'd expect in a small New England town, quaint and modest, with a wooden steeple that seemed to pierce the heavens. Inside, the pews were polished but worn, their edges softened by decades of use. Stained glass windows lined the walls, casting fragmented rainbows of light onto the congregation during morning services. The community was welcoming. Faces old and young greeted me with smiles and warm handshakes, their kindness genuine but not intrusive. Over the weeks, I found myself looking forward to these Sunday mornings. It wasn't necessarily the sermons or the hymns that drew me in, but the sense of belonging, the feeling that I was part of something larger than myself. One Sunday, as the service ended and the congregation began to mingle, I noticed someone I hadn't seen before. She sat a few rows ahead, her figure bathed in the soft glow of sunlight filtering through the stained glass. Her dark, curly hair framed a face that was striking yet serene, her hazel eyes scanning the room with a mix of curiosity and detachment. She looked out of place, like a mystery waiting to be unraveled. Summoning a courage I didn't know I had, I approached her after the service. "Hi, I'm James," I said, awkwardly extending my hand. She smiled, a small, almost secretive smile, and introduced herself as Kaylee. We talked for a while in the churchyard, our conversation flowing effortlessly. She told me she had recently moved to town with her family, who had uprooted their lives in search of a fresh start. There was an air of guardedness about her, as though she was carefully choosing what to share and what to withhold. But even in her reticence, there was warmth. Over the next few weeks, our interactions became more frequent. We exchanged numbers, and soon we were texting daily. Her messages were thoughtful, laced with humor and insight that hinted at a depth of character I found fascinating. Yet, for all her openness, there was a part of her life she kept shrouded in mystery. She rarely spoke of her past, and when she did, her words were tinged with pain. "I don't like to talk about my family much," she admitted one evening. "Let's just say my stepfather made life complicated." Her tone suggested there was more to the story, but I didn't press her. The next Sunday, I asked her out on a date. To my surprise, she agreed without hesitation. We decided to keep it simple, a dinner at a cozy diner followed by a movie. That evening, as we sat across from each other in the warm glow of the diner's neon sign, I felt a connection I hadn't experienced in years. She was magnetic, her laugh infectious, her gaze penetrating. After dinner, not ready to end the night, I suggested we go for a drive. We headed down a quiet, winding road that cut through a dense forest, the kind of route that felt like it led to the edge of the world. The sky was clear, the stars scattered like diamonds against the velvet blackness. Our conversation turned to deeper topics, dreams, fears, the things that kept us awake at night. Kaylee opened up in a way she hadn't before, sharing fragments of her life that painted a picture of resilience and quiet strength. But then, something shifted. Her voice faltered mid-sentence, her gaze unfocused. Suddenly, her body tensed, and a guttural, inhuman sound escaped her lips. Her head tilted back, her mouth moving rapidly as she began speaking in a language I didn't recognize. It was harsh and guttural, each word cutting through the stillness of the night like a jagged blade. Panic surged through me. "Kaylee," I said, my voice trembling. She didn't respond. Her eyes rolled back, and her body convulsed as if she was fighting against something unseen. I pulled the car to the side of the road, my hands shaking as I fumbled for my phone. Before I could dial for help, she abruptly stopped. Her body went limp, and her head slumped forward. For a moment, there was silence, broken only by the sound of my ragged breathing. Then she looked up, her eyes wild and terrified. "I have to go," she whispered, her voice trembling. Before I could stop her, she flung open the car door and ran into the woods, disappearing into the darkness. I sat there, frozen, my mind racing. After what felt like an eternity, I called the police, stammering out an explanation that sounded absurd even to my own ears. They arrived quickly and began searching the area, but there was no sign of her. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. In the days that followed, I tried to find her. Her phone number was disconnected, her social media accounts were gone, and when I asked about her at church, no one seemed to remember her. It was as if she had never existed. To this day, I don't know what happened that night. Was it a psychotic break? A possession? Something else entirely? The memory lingers, a haunting mystery that refuses to fade. Every now and then, I drive down that same road, hoping for answers. But all I find is silence, the kind of silence that keeps you awake at night, wondering if some questions are better left unanswered.